Hello, everyone. Welcome to IERLab Podcast. Now, who is IERLab? IERLab is the Influencer Ethnography Research Lab located at Curtin University in Perth, Western Australia. We specialize in the methodologies and the pedagogies of influencer research. I'm your host, Walter Lee, so let's get into today's episode. Today, we will be focusing on influencer regulations, gender, race, and sexual content. Now, today's guest graduated with an honours in communications at Curtin University. Her research focuses on social media and popular cultures in Asia. Before starting her study, she also gained experience working in influencer marketing and PR agencies. Welcome to the show, Lily.
Hi, hello, Walter. Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent. And we're excited to have you here. Now, it's a recurring question on this show, but it's always good to hear about what got you into your area of research. And more specifically, I'd like to know what was your reasoning for concentrating on certain countries in Asia?
Oh, well, my research interest has always been about social media and popular cultures, and influencers are serving a significant role in this landscape, regardless of region. So a few years back, I was working at a regional influencer company with offices across Asia, including Vietnam, where I was based. So I had the opportunities to involve in a lot of in-the-market projects, such as those between Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, or Vietnam, Korea, Japan, and the like. So often did I notice similarities and discrepancies among these countries. And being able to study these countries feels really good because I could explain how and why certain countries behave differently.
Hmm.
So in our latest report, benchmarking influencer regulations across APAC countries, we pointed out very clearly such discrepancies, and we studied influencer regulations with respect to economic, cultural, social, and political issues. So we propose that it is these issues that govern the differences in how influencers in each country behave and apply the practices. So these differences also stem from unique country-specific issues and the state's directives. However, we also noticed some recurring themes and issues overlapping across countries, such as influencers and online abuse, social expression, gender rights, and among many other issues that influencers in APAC are facing. So this diversity underscores the importance of tailored regulatory frameworks that address the specific needs and challenges of influencers within each nation.
That's really quite interesting. And just staying on the topic of online abuse, in your report, you actually covered several countries, as you mentioned, about online abuse: Australia, Malaysia, the Philippines, just to name a few. Now, what I am quite interested in is because I've lived in both Australia and Korea, and
Oh,
yeah, I see differences between those two countries when it comes to online abuse. Have you noticed any differences in the type of online abuse that influencers get from, let's say, country to country?
oh yes, definitely. In looking at online abuse across different countries, it's very clear that there are significant differences in the roles of influencers, both as victims and the perpetrators of these crimes. So in Australia, we've seen cases where influencers themselves have abused their power. A shocking example involved a former social media influencer sentenced to jail for sexually harassing a minor. So this case highlights the dark side of influencer culture, where the power dynamics can lead to exploitation and abuse. So cases like this also occurred in Singapore, involving an influencer who abused his status to conduct inappropriate behaviors to many girls, followers, and his personal staff, although there has been no escalation to prosecution at all. So, and contrastingly, we've seen influencers fall victim to online harassment. There was an incident happened in Malay to a Malay photographer influencers where she has been digitally harassed and stalked by one of her followers. So the good news was she was able to call help from the authority, and finally the perpetrator has faced his legal punishment. However, not every influencer is able to call for support, especially for mental health issues. So, for example, in Macau, a popular lifestyle influencer who faced severe online abuse and hate speech that contributed to her suicide. And recently, we also see a lot of online crime made by deepfake technology, where influencers' public identity are abused and used for pornographic videos and photos. So this has been a case in the Philippines as well. So in general, the type of online abuse influencers face or perpetrate can vary widely by country, where influencers are taking different positions and roles, and these issues need legal action from the authority and laws to protect the influencers or bring justice to their acts.
I completely agree with you there. And not that I really take too much interest in American online influencers and such, but I have seen many cases of very well-known influencers, similar to the example of, sexual acts against minors, and as well as,
Right.
abusing their power and etc. like that. And in South Korea, there are, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, but there has been obviously this culture, I don't know where it stemmed from these uh, what we call, I guess, trolls, who
Yes, yes.
push the influences to suicide, which is absolutely um, tragic, terrible, all the negative words that I can think of, and the fact that sometimes people just get away with it. I remember there was this one interview um, where they interviewed the troll and they were like, "Why are you doing this?" And he says, "Because I want to." And this is such a weird society that we're living in when social media is supposed to be bringing people together, but instead it is sometimes pushing people apart or uh, making the world look quite dull in many situations. But to get back on track, out of all the countries that you mentioned in your report, which country do you think is heading in the right direction at a faster rate? And I guess for that matter, which country seems to be doing less compared to other countries when looking after their influences?
Oh, well, thanks for this question. I think it's a very interesting question, actually. But I think it is a complex issue to determine who's moving in the right direction because it really depends on how we consider progress and, more importantly, what aspect we are looking at within this web of social and cultural issues. So let's take the law on online sexual content as an example. So in Thailand, well, sharing nude photos online can be illegal under the Computer Crime Act and the Penal Code. Violations can lead to fines or imprisonment. This was highlighted when two OnlyFans creators were arrested while they were in the act of producing pornographic content. So, for those who are not familiar with this platform, OnlyFans is a platform known for subscription-based content, popular with not safe for work content, and adult materials. So following the arrest, there's a growing call from Thai activists for the legalization of pornographic content and sex work to protect workers from sexual harassment, privacy invasion, and ensure their equal rights. And meanwhile, Vietnam's stance is a bit ambiguous. There's a decree against misusing the internet to promote lewdness or harm the national customs, but enforcement seems inconsistent. Additionally, these criteria are pretty vague and not clearly stated, and they are varied by context, content, and public reaction at time. So in real so in reality, Vietnamese influencers have been posting their explicit photos online a lot, but no charges were pressed. So this is different from the case of Malaysia, they where they have specifically stated in the law to allow depiction of sexual content for education, science, and arts.
Hmm.
So between these countries, if we're talking about who's making quicker strides towards addressing the rights of influencers in making sexual content, it might be Malaysia and Thailand, simply because the issues are in the open and prompting public debate and potential legal judges. Vietnam, with its less clear approach, seems to be lacking a little bit, not necessarily in the strictness of its regulations, but in providing a clear and fair framework for influencers to operate within. So, but however, if we look at the issue of LGBTQ plus influencers and their rights, this ranking might be skewed, with Vietnam government allowing same-sex wedding, not same-sex marriage, though it's another topic. But yes, and transgender influencers in Vietnam can change their gender identity now. Malaysia, due to Islamic conservatism, strictly prohibits all forms of representation of LGBTQ plus lifestyle, let alone marriage. So there was a case where a Malay trans woman influencer entrepreneur had to flee to Australia. Otherwise, she would have been arrested and placed in educational camp.
Hmm.
So in general, I don't think any country alone can win over another because there's a lot of aspects to consider, given each government also has different agendas to pursue as well.
I find it very interesting, and I guess this is a topic for another time. I really hope that we can have you back on.
Yeah,
I
sure.
like the Vietnam government allowing same-sex weddings, but not allowing same-sex marriage. I don't quite understand the
Oh,
difference, but um,
yeah,
it
yeah. Actually, weddings mean you can hold weddings like ceremonies, like a real wedding
mm,
ceremony. But in terms of legal recognition on paperwork, let's say, you are not wife and husband, you are just two individual person. So
okay.
if so, they allow that to put it into words.
Mm,
So two men can stay in a house together, raise their kids and baby, but on the terms of legal paperwork on document, they are not wife and husband. They are just living
uh,
together.
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And that does sound like something that we would need to cover on another episode because I think that that is a big topic in itself.
Yes.
But
Yes, definitely.
one fact I found interesting, and we just talked about OnlyFans, is about Singapore and their usage of OnlyFans and
Mhm.
how the Singapore citizens can subscribe to the service, but are not allowed to become an influencer on the service itself. Can you expand on this more for our listeners, why this is the case?
Oh, yes. So in Singapore, the penal code governing the transmission of sexual content is very stringent. It is an offense to transmit obscene materials electronically. That means selling and producing pornographic materials are illegal, but watching porn is not. So OnlyFans creators are committing a felony in Singapore and they will face legal consequences if caught. A notable case involved YouTuber OnlyFans creator Titus Low, who faced legal punishment, including jail time and a hefty fine, because his explicit content got leaked by one of his followers,
Mm.
subscribers would say. So Titus' case raised two concerns. First, even the sharing of consensual sexual images or photos are illegal. And second, if that content spreads, the person who shared it in the first place, usually the influencers or creators, will get blamed. So since Titus was making money from his content and viewers are paying to consume his stuff, his penalty was even harsher than usual. The Singaporean government's position on nudity is the result of a complex interplay of cultural, religious, and societal factors, where conservatism is at the central stage. So this conservatism is a big deal across all Singapore's main communities, including Chinese, Malay, and Indian. So additionally, the Singaporean government frequently justifies its actions by referring to the public opinion, which prioritizes traditional values, sometimes even at the cost of stifling the voices of minor groups.
Hmm.
But in the Philippines, the legal framework around online sexual content, as outlined in the Cybercrime Prevention Act, is also very stringent. However, its enforcement is rather lenient, with influencers sometimes finding loopholes to move
Hmm.
around. For instance, one creator had to utilize her British citizenship to set up an OnlyFans account and arrange for an overseas bank account to manage her earnings, showing extra efforts creators must put into to sidestep the laws. In Singapore, this would never be the case, as the government will not tolerate even if you are a foreigner.
That's quite interesting because I always uh, thought of Singapore as, even though there's a very huge Muslim community there, I thought, especially in the southern eastern Asian countries, that they'd be a bit more open towards this, but they just seem to be just as strict with, let's say,
Yes.
South Korea. Now, actually, that segues like. Have there been other countries of interest, especially within Asia, that you're looking more into? Like, I know that you
Oh,
have mentioned South Korea, and as you know, there's a strict pornographic or pornography laws here, and massive, massive problem with online abuse. But on the other side
yes.
sits Japan, very well known for their adult material. Are there other countries that you're looking into? And what about Japan and Korea?
Oh, well, actually, within this report, we did study Japan and Korea and conducted many interesting cases and findings out of these two countries. However, with respect to social and cultural issues, our focus places on child influencers and cross-border concerns in Korea and Japan. Well, in fact, we dedicating a separate research on the representations of explicit sexual content in Japan and Korea, like alone. So
Hmm.
I'm not able to share details now because we are still working on it. But yeah, please stay tuned to this because they're very fascinating.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to it, because this is an issue
Yes,
that I find quite interesting in Korea since living here. But
right.
in countries like Malaysia and the United Arab Emirates, where Islamic law is dominant, how does this law actually impact the content created by influencers?
Oh, yes. So in the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Malaysia, influencers walk on even thinner lines because there are rules that limit certain expressions, with human rights group calling for its repeal or amendment. For example, a TikTok influencer was arrested in Dubai for making a video that mocks wealthy Emiratis with the abusing internet charge and creating a negative image of Emirati citizens. Comparing that to Malaysia, which is also predominantly Muslim, we can see similarities in the emphasis on respecting Islamic values and public morality. The case of bloggers Al and Vivian is a stark example. To be more specific, in the photo, the two bloggers showing them eating pork during Ramadan with a halal logo, which is considered very, very disrespectful to the
Hmm.
Muslim majority country because the Muslim people they don't eat pork.
Hmm.
So despite the apology, they were jailed without bail pending trial. The case has sparked debate on free speech and a violent incident against an ethnic Chinese man.
Hmm.
So in these countries, influencers operate in a space where they have to balance and constantly navigate creative expression with a deep understanding with of local laws and cultural sensitivities.
It seems very not similar, but like in China as well, they do have obviously
Yeah,
certain guidelines that they must follow and uh in China, I don't think, I guess it could be argued that free speech is really not a thing there as well, because if you speak out against the
right.
government, this is something that is a big problem, especially for Chinese influencers. But we'll have to leave it there today. It was a fascinating talk. I really would love to see,
Yeah,
actually, to have you on again to talk more about some of your work, especially when it comes to South Korea and Japan. Also, the idea
right.
of, the marriage versus wedding situation. But anything you would like to promote, example, your future studies, current works. As I said, there's always potential of having you back on. Is there anything you'd like to mention?
Oh, yes, definitely. Actually, I'm waiting for this. First, as part of our findings from this report, we are going to attend a conference where we will elaborate extensively on giant influencers and regulations across APAC countries. Just a little sneak peek. So most child influencers are protected by labor laws. However, there are multiple cases showing parents usually inadvertently breaching the laws by making children involved in dangerous acts. And this is especially prevalent in South Korea, actually. So another issue is that managing incoming texts for child influencers poses challenges for parents and the policymakers as mismanagement happens, especially in cases that both parents and child are influencers. So second, we are finalizing another study which explores the six popular social media platforms and how they portray and position influencers through platforms initiatives, content format development, and monetization schemes, and more. So we will look very closely into YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, and guess what? OnlyFans. So this will be a very yes, this will be a very comprehensive study, and it is coming out very soon. So please follow and subscribe to our IERLab channels. Yeah, and finally, this is my personal project, which will focus solely on Vietnam, where I make the case about transgender TikTokers in Vietnam and how they fight against social stigma using their new identity and social status. Given that Vietnam is a quite conservative country, I'm very excited about this research because it will be the first to study Vietnamese trans TikTokers. Yep.
Ah.
So that's it from me today.
That's all that sounds extremely interesting. I keep forgetting that OnlyFans is also a form of social media. So
Right.
I haven't had the chance to able to talk about that side of social media. Most of the people I've interviewed, it's either Instagram, it's either TikTok, etc. But I've completely
Yeah.
forgotten that channels like OnlyFans, and also I guess there would be domestic channels that have similar content, are also social media platforms. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about this, and I really hope that this continues and that we are able to talk to you more about this. But
Definitely.
anyway, yes, definitely. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to today's episode of IER Lab Podcast. Once again, thank you to today's guest, Lily.
Yes, thank you so much for your time, Walter, and thank you everyone for sharing out your time listening to our podcast.
Excellent. Thank you. And until next time, this has been Walter Lee. You may click on your next adventure now.